Hello, tonight, you travel back to a world so old that even memory itself seems unfinished. A quiet land where rivers move slowly through endless plains, and where the first whispers of civilization drift softly beneath a copper-colored sky, long before kings, armies, or towering cities ever rise from the earth. You stand beside the wide floodplains of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates wander gently through low stretches of wet soil and pale reeds. The air feels cool and heavy with river mist, and the morning light spreads slowly across the land like warm honey poured over stone. Around you, the earth remains almost entirely untouched by walls or roads. Marsh grasses bend quietly in the wind, while shallow pools left behind by seasonal floods reflect the dim colors of dawn. Somewhere nearby, a water bird lets out a soft cry that sounds strangely polite, almost like someone apologizing for interrupting your thoughts. So before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. As you settle in tonight, feel free to share your local time and where you're listening from. Somewhere far away, another quiet room glows softly in the dark, connected by this story, a calm voice, and the gentle passing of time. Now slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, with letting the steady hum of the air fill the room. And in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. Long before the first city walls appear, this region exists as a vast and shifting plain, shaped entirely by water. Geological studies suggest that around 6000 BCE the rivers flood regularly, spreading rich layers of dark silt across the land. Each flood leaves behind fertile soil thick enough to nourish endless stretches of reeds, grasses, and small wild flowers. You walk slowly beside one of these ancient channels, where the river water carries the color of wet clay beneath the rising sun. Tiny insects hover above the surface in lazy circles, and fish ripple quietly beneath patches of floating reeds. The silence feels so complete that even your breathing begins to match the slow rhythm of the current. At this point in history, there are no grand rulers here, no carved monuments, and no organized kingdoms. The landscape belongs mostly to wind, mud, birds, and water. Small groups of humans move carefully along the riverbanks, carrying woven baskets, simple tools, and bundles of reeds tied together with plant fibers. Archaeologists believe that many early communities in southern Mesopotamia built temporary shelters from mud and marsh plants. These homes stand low against the earth, shaped carefully to survive floods and shifting water levels. In some ways, the structures resemble carefully stacked sandcastles, though thankfully much sturdier than anything built during a family beach vacation. The mornings here arrive gently. A thin layer of mist drifts over the wetlands, while pale sunlight slowly reveals distant stretches of marsh grass. You hear the soft splashing of wooden poles dipping into shallow water as fishermen guide narrow reed boats through quiet channels hidden among the plants. Nearby, smoke rises faintly from small cooking fires. Someone grinds grain with a stone tool, while another person repairs a fishing net beneath the shade of woven reeds. Life moves slowly and carefully, tied completely to the moods of the rivers and the timing of seasonal floods. The rivers themselves shape every detail of existence. When floodwaters rise, they leave behind rich soil capable of supporting early agriculture. Historians often describe Mesopotamia as one of the birthplaces of farming because these fertile floodplains allow humans to settle in one place for longer periods than before. You begin to notice the first signs of permanent life emerging from the stillness. Small mud brick structures stand in loose clusters beside elevated patches of dry ground. Goats wander nearby, chewing lazily on marsh plants, with the calm confidence of creatures that have absolutely no interest in historical significance. At night, the temperature cools quickly beneath enormous open skies. The stars appear startlingly bright above the flat horizon, uninterrupted by towers or smoke. Families gather quietly near weak firelight, while distant frogs croak from hidden pools scattered across the wetlands. The people living here understand the rivers better than anyone else alive at the time. They watch water levels carefully and learn which lands remain safe during floods. Over generations, these observations slowly become shared knowledge, passed through stories, gestures, and repeated daily routines rather than written language. Some researchers believe the southern marshlands of Mesopotamia once extended far closer to the Persian Gulf than they do today. Coastlines shift gradually over thousands of years as rivers deposit enormous amounts of sediment. The land itself changes shape so slowly that no single person could ever notice it happening during their lifetime. As seasons pass, settlements grow slightly larger and more organized. Paths form naturally between homes, storage spaces appear beside cooking areas, and small farming plots begin spreading outward from the villages. Nothing happens suddenly. Civilization enters the world quietly, almost shyly, like someone arriving late to dinner and hoping not to attract attention. You can almost feel the patience of these early communities. There is no rush toward empire yet, no ambition for conquest or domination. Survival itself already requires careful cooperation, especially in a landscape where rivers can nourish life one season and erase entire settlements the next. Even so, the people remain. They rebuild after floods, reshape collapsed walls, and plant fresh crops in newly deposited soil. Their resilience grows slowly through repetition, through ordinary days filled with labor so routine that nobody living there could possibly imagine future historians studying their muddy footprints thousands of years later. Far in the distance, the Tigris and Euphrates drift quietly beneath the fading glow of evening skies. The rivers do not yet know they will someday watch kingdoms rise and disappear along their banks. For now, they move slowly through silence, carrying the earliest whispers of civilization into the darkening world ahead. Night settles slowly across lower Mesopotamia, softening the edges of the land beneath pale silver moonlight. The mud brick walls of Uruk and Eridu glow faintly beside the rivers, their surfaces holding the warmth of the day long after the sun disappears beyond the flat horizon of endless reeds and dark water. You walk quietly along a narrow canal where the water barely moves beneath the stars. The air smells faintly of damp earth, fish oil, and smoke drifting from distant cooking fires. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once before changing its mind, apparently deciding that ancient civilization can manage itself for the evening. Uruk already stands larger than the scattered villages that came before it. Historians often describe it as one of the earliest true cities in human history. By around 3500 BCE, thousands of people live here among clusters of homes, workshops, temples, and carefully arranged storage buildings built from sun-dried mud bricks. The city rises gently from the plain like an island shaped entirely from clay. Streets wind unevenly between walls the color of dried wheat, while narrow alleyways open suddenly onto courtyards are lit by oil lamps flickering softly against the night air. Nothing here feels rushed. Even the silence seems patient. Farther south, Eridu rests beside ancient marshlands, where archaeologists discover traces of some of the earliest irrigation canals ever constructed. These waterways allow farmers to guide river water carefully toward fields of barley and dates, creating stable harvests generation after generation beneath the calm rhythm of seasonal floods. You can hear water moving quietly through these canals long after dark. The sound resembles someone slowly pouring tea into endless cups somewhere beyond the reeds. Workers maintain the channels constantly, removing mud and repairing collapsed banks, so the precious water continues reaching distant farmland without interruption. The people living here understand that survival depends less on force and more on cooperation. Entire communities work together to maintain irrigation systems stretching outward from the cities into surrounding fields. Without these carefully managed canals, the fertile plains would quickly return to marsh, dust, or floodwater. Inside Uruk, temple complexes stand at the center of daily life. Priests oversee food storage, trade records, and ceremonial offerings, while scribes press symbols into soft clay tablets using sharpened reeds. Some of these early markings eventually evolve into cuneiform writing, one of humanity's earliest written systems. At night, storytellers gather beneath open courtyards near temple walls, warmed by fading heat. They speak softly about rivers, stars, and ancient spirits while children drift slowly towards sleep beside woven baskets and folded blankets. The stories move gently through the darkness like boats floating down calm water. Above them, the sky appears enormous and perfectly clear. Mesopotamian astronomer priests observe the movements of constellations with remarkable attention. Long before telescopes exist, they begin recording patterns among the stars, believing celestial movements carry meaning connected to floods, harvests, and the rhythm of human life itself. You look upward and notice how the moonlight reflects across the canal waters, breaking into thin silver lines whenever a breeze touches the surface. The scene feels strangely modern despite its age, as though someone simply turned off the electricity and removed a few highways from the world. Merchants continue traveling even after sunset. Small boats glide silently through dark branches of the Euphrates, carrying wool, grain, pottery, and oil between settlements. The rowers move carefully through narrow waterways beneath desert winds so gentle they barely disturb the hanging reeds beside the banks. Trade slowly connects the growing city-states scattered across Mesopotamia. Materials such as copper, stone, and timber arrive from distant regions where those resources are easier to obtain. In exchange, cities like Uruk provide textiles, grain, and crafted goods shaped by increasingly specialized labor. As populations grow, the cities become more organized. Workers divide responsibilities carefully between farming, construction, pottery, weaving, and administration. Some historians believe this specialization helps transform simple settlements into complex urban societies capable of supporting thousands of people within relatively concentrated areas. Yet despite this growth, life still moves according to natural rhythms older than the cities themselves. Flood seasons determine planting schedules. Winds influence travel. The moon guides nighttime movement along canals. Even the grandest temple walls remain vulnerable to rain, erosion, and the slow pressure of passing centuries. In quieter corners of Eridu, families sit beside small fires built near the edges of marshland pools alive with frogs and insects. Fish dry on woven racks, while clay jars cool beside shallow water channels. The ordinary routines of daily life continue with comforting repetition beneath the stars above southern Mesopotamia. Archaeologists uncover layer upon layer of rebuilding beneath these ancient cities, especially at Eridu. Temples are constructed repeatedly atop older foundations across many centuries. Each generation reshapes the same sacred spaces slightly differently, like careful edits made to a story nobody wishes to completely erase. You slowly notice how these early city-states grow through patience rather than sudden conquest. A canal stretches farther across the plains. Storage halls widen with each passing season. New homes rise beside older walls, while entire urban worlds slowly emerge from soft mud, water, and the quiet rhythm of river life. Night settles peacefully over Uruk and Eridu, while the moonlight glows across their clay walls and narrow canals. Beyond the cities, the plains remain dark and endless beneath the wide Mesopotamian sky. The rivers continue their slow journey southward, carrying reeds, fishing boats, and distant conversations through the quiet silence of the fertile lowlands. Merchants drift along the waterways with baskets of grain, jars of oil, and woven cloth stacked carefully inside wooden boats. Storytellers rest beside temple courtyards, while warm desert winds move softly through the streets after sunset. Even the smallest movements feel calm and measured, like the steady rhythm of breathing during a long and peaceful evening. From this quiet network of canals and mud brick cities, the first powers of Mesopotamia slowly begin rising into history. Nothing changes suddenly. Influence grows beside the rivers, season after season, until humble settlements become kingdoms whose names someday echo across the ancient world. Morning arrives gently over Uruk, spreading pale gold light across the flat rooftops of mud brick homes and narrow streets already warming beneath the early sun. Wooden wheels creak slowly over hardened earth, while workers guide heavy carts filled with barley sacks toward the temple's storehouses standing near the city center. The smell of grain lingers everywhere in the cool morning air. Freshly harvested barley rests inside large storage rooms built beside administrative courtyards where scribes begin another quiet day of counting, measuring, and recording supplies. Somewhere nearby, A stubborn donkey complains loudly about work responsibilities it clearly never agreed to in writing. You walk through one of the city's market streets, where woven baskets hang from wooden poles and traders carefully arrange fish, dates, wool, and jars of oil beneath cloth shades stretched against the rising heat. Dust drifts lazily through beams of sunlight that fall between the buildings like pale ribbons. By around 3200 BCE, the people of Sumer developed one of the earliest known systems of writing. Archaeologists later uncover clay tablets filled with cuneiform symbols pressed into wet clay using sharpened reeds. Many surviving records focus not on kings or heroic stories, but on grain counts, taxes, livestock, trade agreements, and the quiet routines of ordinary business throughout the growing cities. Inside a shaded administrative room, a scribe sits quietly beside rows of damp clay tablets stacked carefully upon wooden shelves. His fingers move slowly as wedge-shaped symbols sink into soft clay with practiced precision learned through many years of repetition. The room carries the faint scent of wet earth and warm lamp oil drifting gently beneath the soft glow of morning sunlight. The writing system itself begins very simply. Early symbols represent quantities of goods, such as grain, livestock, and oil. Over generations, these markings evolve into increasingly complex forms of communication. Human memory slowly transfers itself into clay, allowing cities like Uruk to organize trade and resources with remarkable stability. Outside, the market grows busier without ever becoming loud. Merchants speak in calm voices, while exchanging woven textiles, dried fish, pottery, and vegetable oils gathered from nearby settlements. Nothing feels hurried here. The city moves with the patient rhythm of a river flowing steadily through familiar land. Women carry baskets balanced carefully against their shoulders, while children weave between market stalls, chasing one another through clouds of fine dust. An old trader adjusts rows of clay jars with the seriousness of someone arranging priceless treasures, though from a distance they resemble extremely determined soup containers. You notice how carefully organized the city has become compared to the earlier villages along the riverbanks. Streets connect residential areas to workshops and temple complexes. Storage buildings stand close to administrative centers where goods are counted and redistributed according to systems maintained by priests and officials. Historians believe temple institutions play a central role in the economy of early Mesopotamian cities. Temples manage agricultural surplus, coordinate labor, and oversee trade relationships with nearby settlements. Religion and administration remain deeply connected, woven together as naturally as reeds braided along the riverbanks. Near the edge of the marketplace, fishermen unload baskets filled with river carp and small freshwater fish caught earlier that morning. Their reed boats drift gently beside wooden docks darkened by water stains and years of use. The river itself remains calm beneath the growing brightness of the day. Farther down the street, wool traders display folded textiles dyed in soft, earthy colors. Sheep raised on nearby grazing land provide one of the region's most valuable resources. Mesopotamian wool eventually becomes an important trade product exchanged across long-distance routes connecting distant cities and cultures. As you continue walking, you pass a courtyard where workers shape wet clay into bricks, drying slowly beneath the sun. Construction never truly stops in Uruk. Walls require constant repair, homes expand gradually, and new buildings rise carefully atop older foundations worn smooth by generations of human footsteps. The stability of Uruk depends not only on trade, but also on cooperation between settlements scattered beside the Euphrates. Long canals carry goods across the plains more gently than wagons crossing dry earth. Boats loaded with grain, pottery, and woven textiles drift steadily between distant cities connected through water, patience, and quiet necessity. This expanding network of exchange slowly shapes new forms of influence throughout southern Mesopotamia. Cities controlling irrigation canals, harvest storage, and river trade gain increasing authority over nearby communities. Power grows gradually through organization and resources long before massive armies appear upon the dusty horizons of the ancient river valley surrounding Uruk. Even so, daily life inside Uruk remains calm and surprisingly ordinary beneath the warm afternoon light. Bakers prepare flatbread beside glowing clay ovens, while potters shape heavy storage jars with careful hands darkened by wet soil. Nearby, a wandering goat strolls confidently through the crowded market like an accidental supervisor of commerce. The afternoon heat settles heavily across narrow streets lined with pale mud brick walls and woven market shades. Merchants pause beneath strips of hanging cloth, while scribes continue pressing symbols into soft clay tablets. Their quiet records of trade, harvests, and labor will survive thousands of years beneath drifting sand and collapsed buildings afterward. As evening slowly approaches, the noise of the market softens into scattered voices and distant footsteps beside the canals. Sunlight fades gently across the rooftops, while riverboats continue drifting through the darkening water. Somewhere beyond the city walls, new settlements continue growing quietly beside the Euphrates, preparing larger kingdoms still waiting far ahead. Archaeologists later uncover thousands of these tablets buried within the ruins of Uruk and other Sumerian cities. Together, they reveal a civilization deeply focused on practical organization, resource management, and trade. The earliest written records of humanity emerge not from grand speeches, but from the quiet routines of daily survival. As evening approaches, marketplaces quiet, while boats drift along the Euphrates beneath fading golden light. Smoke rises softly above cooking fires, and distant voices echo between mud brick walls warmed by the long day. In this calm and carefully ordered world, the foundations of Mesopotamian power continue growing quietly beside the eternal rivers. The great ziggurats rise slowly from the plains of Mesopotamia, like quiet stairways built for the sky itself. Their sun-baked bricks glow softly beneath pale, sand-colored morning light, while long shadows stretch across narrow canals, flowing carefully through endless barley fields and thick reeds. The surrounding land feels calm and ancient, resting beneath a silence, broken only by distant water and drifting desert wind. You stand beside one of these waterways near the city-state of Lagash, listening to water brush softly against clay canal walls darkened by moisture. The air smells faintly of damp soil warmed beneath the rising sunlight. Somewhere across the distant fields, a bird calls once before silence gently settles over the farmland again, leaving only the slow movement of water through the quiet irrigation channels nearby. The canals here are not random channels carved carelessly into the earth, without planning or purpose. Archaeological studies reveal remarkably organized irrigation systems designed to guide river water precisely where crops need it most. Workers maintain these waterways constantly, adjusting gates, repairing embankments, and removing mud carried downstream during seasonal flooding beneath the heavy Mesopotamian sun that watches patiently over the surrounding plains each year. Without such careful management, the surrounding farmland could never support large populations for very long. Too little water leaves the soil cracked beneath the fierce Mesopotamian heat, while sudden flooding can destroy entire harvests within only days. Balance becomes the invisible foundation beneath every successful settlement, quietly supporting homes, markets, temples, and human life across the river valleys through countless passing generations over time. Near the center of Lagash, the towering ziggurat rises above surrounding homes and narrow streets with calm authority. Unlike later pyramids serving mainly as tombs, these temple platforms connect religious ceremonies with daily administration. Climbing the worn stone steps, you watch canals, rooftops, and shimmering fields spread outward below, like quiet currents flowing gently through an immense living river system beneath the warm afternoon light. Inside shaded temple courtyards, priests and scribes work quietly beside baskets overflowing with grain gathered from nearby farms and fertile riverbanks. Damp clay tablets rest carefully beside sharpened reed styluses, while officials record harvest totals, labor duties, and food distributions with remarkable patience. Civilization here depends deeply upon counting, measuring, remembering, and maintaining order through generations of careful observation beside the rivers. The scribes press wedge-shaped symbols carefully into soft clay with slow, practiced concentration beneath the shelter of woven reed roofs. One young assistant pauses briefly to stretch his stiff fingers before returning to another long list of grain inventories and canal repairs. Even in ancient Mesopotamia, paperwork somehow survives every empire, every flood, and several impressively stubborn centuries of administrative determination beside dusty temple walls. Outside the temple walls, children wander beneath tall rows of date palms growing beside narrow canals carrying cool water toward distant fields. Their laughter drifts softly through the warm afternoon air, while nearby women wash woven cloth carefully along the muddy riverbanks. Daily life continues with calm familiarity beneath the silent presence of towering ziggurats rising patiently above the crowded neighborhoods and winding waterways below. Historians believe cities such as Lagash grow prosperous largely through their remarkable ability to organize labor, maintain irrigation systems, and stabilize agricultural production across difficult environmental conditions. Carefully managed canals allow communities to harvest food consistently for generations, creating enough surplus to support craftsmen, merchants, priests, administrators, and builders beyond the needs of simple farming populations scattered across southern Mesopotamia beneath wide open skies. As the years pass slowly beside the rivers, these stable systems steadily strengthen the influence of individual city-states throughout southern Mesopotamia. Control over canals gradually becomes just as valuable as control over walls, armies, or distant trade routes crossing the plains. Whoever manages the movement of water often shapes the survival of entire communities living quietly beside the Tigris and Euphrates beneath endless seasons of heat and flooding. You continue walking along narrow canal paths where workers inspect wooden gates, directing water carefully into surrounding farmland and smaller irrigation channels. The work appears calm, repetitive, and almost peaceful beneath the afternoon sun, yet enormous responsibility rests within these quiet daily routines. One neglected canal could leave fields dry for months, while uneven distribution might slowly create resentment between neighboring settlements beside the ever-flowing rivers. At first, these tensions remain small and almost invisible. One village complains about reduced water flow during a particularly dry season. Another repairs canal sections farther upstream, unintentionally redirecting more water toward its own fields. The rivers continue moving calmly, while human concerns slowly deepen beneath the surface. Ancient inscriptions later describe disputes between neighboring city-states over fertile border regions and irrigation rights. Land near functioning canals becomes increasingly valuable as populations grow. What once feels like endless open space gradually transforms into carefully measured territory, connected directly to survival and political influence. Still, for now, the atmosphere across Mesopotamia remains mostly peaceful. Evening light settles softly over the fields, while farmers guide animals home beside narrow water channels reflecting fading gold beneath the sky. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires, carrying the comforting scent of barley bread and roasted onions. You notice how the canals themselves mirror the stars once darkness arrives. Long lines of silver light drift silently through the fields beside sleeping villages and towering temples. Frogs croak softly among the reeds, while distant voices fade slowly into the enormous stillness of the night. In this calm world of mud brick cities and carefully managed rivers, power grows gradually through organization rather than spectacle. The temples stand watch beside silent canals, recording harvests, guiding labor, and shaping the rhythm of daily life. Yet far beyond the quiet fields of Lagash, the rivers have already begun shifting their courses with the seasons. And where the movement of water slowly changes direction, human ambition quietly follows close behind. Beneath the peaceful glow of moonlit canals and towering ziggurats, the first hidden tensions between Mesopotamian city-states begin gathering patiently, like distant thunder concealed far beyond the dark horizon, still silent beneath the vast and watchful desert sky. The canals of southern Mesopotamia move quietly beneath the pale afternoon sky, carrying thin ribbons of water through long fields of barley and reeds. You stand beside the slow current and notice how the banks curve gently into the distance, as though the land itself has fallen asleep beneath the weight of many warm seasons. Even the wind seems careful not to disturb the silence too quickly. For many generations, these canals have given life to the cities scattered across the plains. Water travels patiently from the Euphrates into narrow channels shaped by human hands, feeding orchards, filling clay jars, and softening fields where farmers bend slowly beneath the sunlight. The rhythm feels dependable, almost comforting, like hearing the same quiet clock tick softly through every evening of childhood. Archaeologists believe the Sumerians built increasingly complex irrigation systems as populations expanded during the third millennium before Christ. Entire communities depended upon carefully measured water distribution, and officials recorded these movements on clay tablets using early cuneiform symbols. Somewhere in the distance, a tired administrator probably wishes ancient paperwork could magically organize itself like a modern phone application. At first, the growing cities seem connected by cooperation rather than conflict. Merchants continue guiding donkeys along dusty roads between Lagash, Umma, and Kish. Boats drift slowly along canals carrying woven cloth, dates, fish, and jars of sesame oil. Yet beneath these ordinary routines, the balance between neighboring city-states begins shifting almost invisibly, like small cracks forming quietly beneath painted walls. The fertile borderland known as Guadena rests between Lagash and Umma, stretching across low fields nourished by branching canals. Ancient inscriptions later describe disputes over this territory, making it one of the earliest known border conflicts recorded in human history around 2450 before Christ. Even thousands of years ago, people still argue over property lines with remarkable confidence and very little enthusiasm for compromise. You walk slowly beside one of these irrigation channels during late afternoon. Thin reeds sway beside the muddy water while dragonflies hover briefly over the surface before disappearing again into the warm air. Nearby farmers continue repairing small clay barriers along the banks, understanding that a single damaged canal gate could leave entire fields dry before the next flood season arrives. The rulers of Lagash and Umma do not appear as dramatic conquerors inside this story. Instead, they feel like tired caretakers attempting to protect grain supplies, water routes, and fragile harvest cycles. Their decisions rise from practical concerns shaped by geography and survival, much like neighbors quietly disagreeing about where one garden fence should finally stand after several difficult summers. Ancient inscriptions connected to the ruler Eonatum of Lagash describe conflicts with Umma over irrigation rights and agricultural territory. Historians later discovered fragments of these accounts, carved into stone monuments and clay records preserved beneath desert soil. Time has softened the sharpness of these disputes, leaving only faint echoes resting quietly beneath museum lights and layers of drifting dust. As evening approaches, the barley fields begin glowing beneath low amber sunlight. Workers gather bundles of reeds while distant figures guide oxen slowly back toward mud brick shelters near the canals. Nobody moves quickly here because the heat discourages unnecessary effort and because life beside the rivers has always unfolded according to slower rhythms than ambitious kings might prefer. The soldiers crossing these plains carry bronze-tipped spears and simple leather shields darkened by age and weather. Their footsteps lift thin clouds of yellow dust that linger briefly in the air before settling back onto the roads. Yet even these armed processions feel strangely quiet beneath the enormous sky, more like weary travelers than heroes marching toward glorious battles celebrated in songs. At night, small cooking fires flicker softly beside canal embankments outside the cities. Young guards sit beneath blankets of stars while listening to frogs croak somewhere near the water's edge. The silence between conversations stretches comfortably across the darkness, interrupted only by distant animal calls and the occasional splash of fish moving through the reeds like silver shadows. The conflict between Lagash and Umma eventually leads to shifting alliances, changing rulers, and carefully negotiated boundaries marked by stone monuments. One inscription suggests agreements were sometimes confirmed through religious oaths before the gods. Even ancient diplomats apparently understand that paperwork becomes much more serious when divine witnesses are invited into the meeting room without asking for refreshments. Despite these disputes, ordinary life continues almost unchanged for many people living across Mesopotamia. Bakers still grind barley into flour before sunrise, potters continue shaping wet clay beside spinning wheels, and fishermen drift quietly along narrow waterways searching for movement beneath the reflective surface. History often remembers kings first, though most ancient days belong quietly to workers and families. The rivers themselves remain indifferent to human ambition. Seasonal floods continue arriving according to natural cycles shaped by distant mountains and melting snow far beyond the southern plains. Water sometimes nourishes one settlement while damaging another, reminding every city-state that nature follows its own patterns without loyalty toward any ruler carved into official records or temple walls. You begin noticing how deeply connected these civilizations are to the movement of water itself. Every harvest, every trade route, every temple offering depends upon canals maintained carefully through collective effort. The tension growing between neighboring cities therefore feels less like sudden hatred and more like pressure slowly building within an aging system stretched beyond comfortable limits over many generations. As darkness settles across the plains, moonlight reflects softly from irrigation channels weaving between sleeping fields. Mud brick walls cool beneath the night air, while distant dogs bark somewhere beyond the outer farms. The world grows quieter now, and the disputes of rulers seem very small beneath the vast sky, hanging above the ancient rivers like a silent ocean of stars. Far to the north, beyond the calmer southern plains, new powers are already beginning to gather strength among broader trade routes and expanding settlements. But tonight, the canals still flow steadily through Guadena beneath the silver moonlight, carrying water past silent barley fields, while Mesopotamia drifts slowly toward another chapter in its long and restless history. Night settles slowly across Mesopotamia, covering the plains in soft darkness, while the last traces of heat drift upward from the cracked earth. Above the cities of Kish, and Lagash, thousands of stars emerge across the desert sky with a quiet brilliance untouched by smoke or electric light. The heavens appear endless here, stretching over mud brick walls and narrow canals like a silent sea suspended above the sleeping world. The rulers of these city-states continue strengthening their authority through carefully organized armies made of farmers, laborers, and young men carrying bronze spears beneath leather shields. Their forces are still small compared to the empires that future centuries will one day produce. Yet within this era, they represent growing ambition and carefully guarded influence. Even ancient kings seem convinced that slightly larger armies automatically improve every complicated political discussion. During the reign of Anitum of Lagash, sometime around the 25th century before Christ, conflicts with neighboring Umma intensify across the fertile borderlands. The famous monument known today as the Stele of the Vultures records part of this struggle through carved scenes of marching soldiers and fallen enemies. Time, however, has softened these once powerful declarations into quiet stone fragments resting calmly inside modern museum halls. You stand beside one of the outer walls of Lagash as evening deepens into night. Torches flicker weakly beside narrow gateways, while guards wrapped in wool garments watch the distant horizon without speaking much. Their faces appear tired, rather than fierce, shaped more by long days beneath the sun than by dreams of glory carved into official monuments. Far beyond the city walls, the camps of soldiers settle into stillness after sunset. Small fires burn low beside bundles of spears stacked carefully upon the ground. Young men sit together sharing flatbread and dates while the dry wind moves softly through the reeds nearby. Someone quietly jokes that sleeping beside a bronze shield feels less comfortable than sleeping beside an irritated goat. The soldiers serving these rulers are not professional warriors in the modern sense. Many spend part of the year tending fields or repairing irrigation canals before returning temporarily to military service during conflicts between neighboring states. Life moves between farming and warfare with unsettling ease, as though carrying grain baskets and carrying spears belong naturally within the same ordinary routine. At night, the desert sky becomes the true center of attention. Without lamps or crowded streets, every constellation shines with startling clarity above the plains of southern Mesopotamia. Priests and astronomers inside temple compounds quietly observe these movements, believing the heavens reveal patterns connected to divine order, seasonal floods, and perhaps even the fortunes of kings struggling for control below. The Stela of the Vultures itself once stood proudly as a public symbol of victory. Historians believe it depicted organized infantry formations marching beneath banners, while vultures hovered above fallen soldiers after battle. Yet now the surviving fragments rest silently behind glass displays, their sharp political purpose transformed into something calmer, almost reflective beneath the careful lighting of modern archaeology museums. You walk through a narrow alley in Kish, where clay houses lean gently toward one another beneath the moonlight. A potter closes his workshop for the evening, while nearby children chase each other across the dusty ground before their mothers call them indoors. Life continues quietly, even while rulers compete for territory and influence beyond the city walls. The kings of Mesopotamia strengthen their authority not only through warfare, but also through temples, trade routes, and irrigation systems. A ruler who protects canals and grain supplies gains trust from farmers whose survival depends entirely upon stable harvests. Political power here flows alongside water itself, moving through channels that must constantly be repaired before everything begins falling apart beneath the heat. Beyond the southern cities, northern Mesopotamia slowly grows more active through expanding trade networks connecting distant settlements. Caravans carrying timber, stone, copper, and precious goods travel along increasingly important routes between regions once separated by geography and local rivalries. Somewhere far ahead, new leaders are already preparing to reshape the balance of power across the Fertile Crescent. As midnight approaches, campfires burn lower outside the ancient cities. Young soldiers wrapped in rough blankets stare upward at the stars while listening to wind brush against dried mud brick walls. The sound feels strangely peaceful despite the uncertainty surrounding tomorrow's marches and border disputes. Human worry often fades temporarily beneath skies large enough to make every kingdom appear remarkably small. Historians later describe this era as part of the early dynastic period of Sumerian civilization, marked by competing city-states and shifting alliances across southern Mesopotamia. Yet from within the quiet rhythm of daily life, these political transformations probably feel gradual rather than dramatic. Most people remain focused upon crops, water levels, livestock, taxes, and whether tomorrow's bread supply will stretch comfortably through another week. The rulers of begin investing in stronger defenses and larger ceremonial structures during this period. Temples rise above surrounding neighborhoods, while officials record offerings and grain storage on clay tablets carefully pressed with cuneiform writing. Administration grows increasingly complex, proving that ancient governments already understand the exhausting relationship between bureaucracy and endless record-keeping. Near the edge of one military encampment, an older soldier sharpens a bronze blade beside fading embers, while younger recruits slowly drift into sleep nearby. The stars above him remain perfectly steady despite the ambitions of rulers below. In moments like this, the human world feels temporary beside the calm endurance of the desert sky stretching endlessly across the night. Quietly, almost invisibly, a new political center begins forming farther north, near the region that future generations will call Akkad. Trade routes become busier, leaders more ambitious, and connections between distant settlements increasingly important. Change moves through Mesopotamia slowly at first, like water seeping carefully through cracks in dry earth after months without rain. Before dawn approaches, Kish, and Lagash rest beneath cool darkness while guards walk silently along ancient walls. Campfires fade into drifting smoke beneath calm stars shining over the plains. Beyond the horizon, another order waits patiently to rise beneath the same dusty Mesopotamian sky. The roads stretching across Mesopotamia grow longer and busier beneath the pale light of early morning. Dust rises softly beneath the hooves of donkeys carrying copper ingots, cedar wood, woven cloth, and baskets filled with dates from southern orchards. You walk beside these slow-moving caravans and notice how the world seems wider now, as though the rivers themselves are quietly reaching toward distant horizons beyond the familiar plains. Around 2334 before Christ, a ruler from the northern city of Akkad begins expanding his influence across Mesopotamia. History remembers him as Sargon of Akkad, a figure later surrounded by legends and royal inscriptions. Yet within this story, he arrives less like a thunderstorm and more like the gradual appearance of new footsteps along roads already worn smooth by centuries of trade and movement. The merchants traveling these dusty roads rarely move quickly. Their animals walk patiently beneath timber, stone, and metal carried from distant lands beyond Sumer. Small bells tied loosely to harnesses create soft metallic rhythms in the warm air. Somewhere nearby, an exhausted donkey almost certainly protests another long uphill journey beneath the afternoon sun. Sargon's rise begins in the north, where trade networks connect many smaller settlements across fertile valleys and dry uplands. Unlike the southern city-states that depend heavily upon irrigation canals, northern regions rely more upon seasonal rainfall and overland connections. This difference slowly creates a broader political landscape, one capable of supporting larger ambitions and more flexible systems of control. You arrive at a roadside settlement where travelers rest beside shallow wells lined with stone. Fires burn quietly beneath clay cooking pots, while traders exchange stories about distant cities farther south along the Euphrates. News spreads slowly here through conversations repeated across countless evenings, carried from one caravan stop to another like drifting smoke moving patiently across open land. Historians consider Sargon the founder of one of the earliest empires in recorded human history. Ancient inscriptions claim he ruled over many Sumerian cities and extended Akkadian influence across large parts of Mesopotamia. Yet even powerful rulers remain dependent upon ordinary roads, patient animals, reliable grain supplies, and people willing to continue walking beneath the endless desert sun day after day. The cities of Sumer gradually come under Akkadian control through military campaigns, alliances, and political restructuring. Uruk, Lagash, and other powerful centers continue functioning, but now within a broader system directed from the north. The transformation does not erase local traditions immediately. Instead, cultures begin blending slowly together like river water during flood season, impossible to separate once currents fully merge. At dusk, the roads glow deep red beneath fading sunlight, while caravans continue moving toward distant settlements. Dust clings to wool garments and leather sandals as traders guide tired animals along familiar routes marked by scattered stones and dry shrubs. The world feels enormous and strangely peaceful, even while entire political systems quietly rearrange themselves across the horizon. The Akkadian language gradually spreads beside Sumerian traditions throughout the empire. Official records, religious customs, and administrative practices begin overlapping in ways that shape Mesopotamian civilization for generations. In temple courtyards and busy marketplaces, different accents mingle together beneath the same hot sky. Humanity has always been remarkably skilled at exchanging both goods and complicated pronunciation problems during trade negotiations. You pass through a small village where craftsmen shape bronze tools beside open workshops built from mud brick and reed roofs. Children watch caravans move past with quiet curiosity, while elders sit beneath shade structures discussing water levels and harvest expectations. Though rulers change and borders expand, daily life continues through routines repeated so often they begin feeling older than memory itself. Ancient legends later describe Sargon as a child set afloat upon a river inside a basket sealed with bitumen, a story that survives across centuries through fragmented texts. Historians debate how much truth rests within these accounts, yet the image remains strangely gentle. A future emperor begins not with roaring armies, but with quiet water carrying something fragile through the reeds. The empire growing under Akkadian rule depends heavily upon these long-distance trade connections. Timber arrives from distant mountains, precious stones travel from eastern lands, and metals move steadily through organized routes linking regions once separated by geography and local politics. Roads become the invisible threads holding the empire together, stretching across deserts and river valleys like lines woven carefully into an enormous tapestry. As night approaches, travelers gather beside small fires near the roadside. The stars above Mesopotamia shine brightly across the open sky, while distant jackals call softly from somewhere beyond the darkness. People speak quietly about taxes, grain shipments, weather patterns, and rumors surrounding northern officials. Empires may rise through conquest, but they survive through conversations carried patiently between ordinary people sharing meals beneath the stars. Sargon appoints governors and administrators throughout conquered territories, creating systems that allow Akkadian authority to reach deep into southern Mesopotamia. Clay tablets record shipments, labor obligations, and temple offerings with increasing precision. Bureaucracy spreads almost as effectively as armies, proving once again that paperwork has followed humanity faithfully through nearly every stage of civilization. The roads themselves become symbols of connection rather than separation. Caravans carrying copper from Anatolia or lapis lazuli from distant eastern regions pass through lands where Sumerian and Akkadian traditions now coexist. Languages blend together inside crowded markets, while religious customs quietly adapt to changing political realities. Cultures rarely disappear completely. Instead, they absorb one another slowly through generations of shared movement and survival. Late at night, Mesopotamia's long roads grow quiet beneath cool desert air. Caravan animals rest beside fading fires, while cloaked guards watch distant horizons hidden by darkness. The empire expands gradually through these endless routes, carried not only by force, but by trade, memory, and the patient rhythm of footsteps crossing ancient earth together. Before dawn returns, the plains remain still beneath fading stars, while the roads stretch endlessly beyond sight. Far away, another caravan begins moving slowly across Akkad's dust-covered world. As pale light touches the horizon, a new age advances quietly beside the rivers, carried onward beneath the vast Mesopotamian sky by countless travelers. The empire of Akkad stretches across vast lands beneath skies that seem wider with every passing season. Roads continue carrying merchants, officials, and soldiers between distant cities linked by trade and administration. Yet beneath this appearance of stability, the land itself begins changing quietly. The rivers still flow, but the air grows drier each year, and the earth slowly tightens beneath the weight of a long and patient drought. You travel across the northern plains during early morning, and notice how the soil breaks apart beneath careful footsteps. Thin cracks spread through the ground like faded lines across ancient pottery. Farmers stand silently beside shrinking fields, while warm winds drift over empty canals, carrying more dust than moisture. Even the donkeys walking beside the caravans seem slightly less enthusiastic about the situation than usual. Modern climate studies suggest that around 2200 before Christ, Mesopotamia experienced a severe period of arid conditions lasting many decades. Archaeologists and geologists have found evidence of declining rainfall, abandoned settlements, and layers of wind-blown dust across parts of the Akkadian world. Nature itself appears to shift slowly during this era, changing the balance upon which cities and rulers once depended so confidently. The empire still functions, at least from a distance. Officials continue recording grain deliveries on clay tablets, while temple priests perform rituals beneath towering walls of sun-baked brick. But behind these routines, shortages begin spreading through villages and urban districts alike. The canals require more labor to maintain, harvests become less reliable, and the quiet certainty that once supported Akkadian power begins fading like paint beneath endless sunlight. At sunset, caravans moving across the dry plains raise pale clouds of dust that linger for long moments in the still air. Traders wrap cloth over their mouths while guiding tired animals toward distant wells that no longer feel completely dependable. The landscape itself seems quieter now, stripped of some softness it once carried during seasons of fuller rivers and greener banks. Families begin leaving smaller settlements affected by failing agriculture. They travel slowly beside carts, carrying woven baskets, clay jars, blankets, and small household idols shaped from baked earth. Some carry tiny statues of protective gods wrapped carefully inside cloth bundles, believing familiar spirits might still watch over them while the old world quietly changes around them. You stop beside one abandoned irrigation channel where reeds once grew thick beside flowing water. Now only scattered patches remain along the cracked banks, while dry wind moves gently through brittle grass. A child walking nearby drags a stick through the dust absent-mindedly, tracing circles that disappear moments later beneath drifting sand. History often fades gradually before anyone fully realizes it has already begun leaving. The cities of Akkad do not collapse all at once. Instead, authority weakens unevenly across distant territories as communication slows, and resources become harder to control. Local rulers regain influence while older Sumerian city-states begin quietly reasserting themselves. Political maps shift softly during these years. more like changing river channels than sudden storms sweeping violently across the land. Ancient texts from later Mesopotamian traditions describe periods of famine and hardship connected to the decline of Akkadian power. Some inscriptions speak of empty fields and disrupted trade routes. Though these accounts contain layers of myth and memory, they preserve a sense of uncertainty that likely touched many ordinary lives throughout the region during this difficult transition. At night, the winds grow cooler across the dry plains. Travelers gather close beside small fires while distant stars flicker above the darkened earth with cold clarity. Conversations become quieter now, focused on water supplies, safe routes, and rumors about conditions farther south. Someone mutters that the weather has become more unpredictable than an exhausted goat trying to cross a crowded market square. In the southern cities, old traditions continue surviving beneath changing political conditions. Priests still light temple lamps before dawn, while scribes carefully impress symbols into wet clay using reed styluses. Yet beneath these familiar routines, people sense the wider system becoming fragile. The empire no longer feels permanent, and permanence itself begins revealing how temporary it has always been. You walk through a half-empty settlement where mud brick walls crumble slowly beside abandoned courtyards. Clay storage jars remain stacked neatly in one corner, as though someone expected to return after only a short absence. Dust gathers across silent rooms while small birds nest inside cracks along the upper walls. Time moves gently here, reclaiming human spaces without anger or celebration. The old city-states of Sumer gradually awaken once more amid Akkad's weakening control. Uruk, Lagash, and other centers begin recovering portions of their former independence, while local leaders rebuild regional authority. History in Mesopotamia rarely follows straight lines. Power rises, scatters, and reforms repeatedly, much like the rivers changing course across the plains through countless flood seasons. Some scholars believe environmental stress weakened Akkadian rule, especially across regions dependent upon stable agriculture. Climate alone never explains political change, yet the connection between nature and empire becomes difficult to ignore. Even powerful rulers remain vulnerable to rainfall, river levels, drought, and shifting winds beyond human control. Late one evening, you stand beside the remains of a roadside shrine where travelers once paused before continuing northward. Small clay figurines rest quietly inside, their features softened by centuries of dust and wind, yet their survival feels strangely comforting. Even as kingdoms fade into silence, human beings continue carrying memory gently forward through time itself. Across Mesopotamia, the air grows hazy beneath blowing sand drifting slowly across the plains. Caravans still follow the ancient roads, though their pace now feels heavier with uncertainty and distance. The Akkadian Empire fades gradually into history, not through one sudden collapse, but through many quiet seasons of movement, adaptation, endurance, and life beneath an unforgiving sky. Before dawn returns, the plains remain silent beneath cool darkness, while dry wind brushes gently through abandoned canals and sleeping camps. Somewhere far away, the old city-states begin stirring again, beneath layers of dust and memory. Above the fading empire, the stars continue shining calmly across Mesopotamia, untouched by the rise or decline of earthly thrones below. The city of rises once again beside the slow-moving waters of southern Mesopotamia, its walls glowing softly beneath the fading light of evening. After the long instability that followed the decline of Akkad, rulers of the III dynasty begin rebuilding order through careful administration, taxation, and monumental construction. The city feels steadier now, like a weary traveler finally finding a quiet place to rest after many difficult roads. You walk through narrow streets lined with mud brick homes, where warm desert air still lingers between the walls long after sunset approaches. Merchants close wooden shutters over market stalls, while distant temple bells echo faintly across the city. Dust drifts gently through the alleys, settling upon sandals and woven baskets with the patience of something that knows it will eventually cover everything. The rulers of III, especially King Ur-Nammu and his successors, attempt to restore centralized authority across much of southern Mesopotamia around the 21st century before Christ. They organize systems of taxation, labor, and legal administration with remarkable precision. Ancient bureaucracy grows increasingly detailed during this era, proving once again that governments throughout history have deeply trusted clay tablets to solve nearly every complicated situation imaginable. Above the city stands the great ziggurat of enormous and silent beneath the crimson evening sky. Built with millions of mud bricks coated in baked outer layers, the structure rises like a stepped mountain from the flat plains surrounding it. Even today, its remains still survive in modern Iraq, carrying the faded memory of countless sunsets reflected across its ancient walls. At dusk, the ziggurat casts long shadows across nearby courtyards and storage buildings, while priests climb broad stairways carrying lamps toward upper temple chambers. The air smells faintly of clay, smoke, and warm reeds gathered from the riverbanks earlier in the day. Somewhere below, a tired worker probably wonders why every impressive monument somehow requires carrying endless heavy bricks under exhausting weather conditions. Life within slowly settles into familiar rhythms once more. Women sit beside shaded courtyards spinning wool into thread, while scribes record grain deliveries and labor quotas onto wet clay tablets pressed carefully with reed styluses. Along the canals, narrow boats glide quietly through dark water, carrying fish, barley, and baskets of dates between neighboring districts and surrounding farms. You pause beside one of these waterways as evening birds move low across the water's surface. The canal reflects the deepening colors of the sky, while boatmen guide long wooden poles carefully through the mud below. Their movements feel practiced and calm, shaped by generations who understand that survival in Mesopotamia depends less upon speed than upon patience and steady repetition. The administrative systems of Ur-3 become some of the most organized in the ancient world. Thousands of clay tablets survive from this period, documenting taxes, livestock counts, trade goods, labor assignments, and temple inventories. Historians later discover that ancient officials monitored nearly everything with astonishing dedication. Humanity's love for detailed record-keeping apparently survives every empire, climate shift, and political collapse. In the workshops near the city center, craftsmen shape jewelry, pottery, bronze tools, and carved musical instruments beneath flickering oil lamps. The sounds of quiet labor continue long after sunset settles fully across the city. Hammers tap softly against metal while potters smooth wet clay with careful hands. Even after periods of conflict and uncertainty, ordinary creativity always seems to return alongside stability. The rulers of also invest heavily in religious architecture and ceremonial life. Temples dedicated to the moon god Nana receive offerings of grain, livestock, and incense, while festivals bring moments of collective celebration into the structured routines of urban life. Yet even these sacred spaces feel calm rather than overwhelming, wrapped gently within the slower rhythm of Mesopotamian evenings. Outside the city walls, barley fields stretch beneath the cooling light of evening. Irrigation canals continue feeding farmland supporting temples and royal officials alike. Farmers repair embankments, while distant shepherds guide flocks toward reed shelters. The entire landscape feels quietly connected through water, labor, and routines repeated across countless generations beside the rivers. But far to the west, beyond the fertile river plains, new movements slowly gather strength among migrating Amorite groups traveling eastward across drier lands. These tribes do not arrive suddenly like storms. Instead, they move gradually over many seasons, following shifting opportunities shaped by climate, trade, and political weakness across the broader region surrounding Mesopotamia. You stand atop part of the city wall while warm evening wind drifts across the plain, carrying traces of desert dust from distant horizons. Guards wrapped in wool cloaks stare westward beneath the darkening sky, though the world beyond remains quiet for now. Change often approaches slowly enough that most people barely notice it until entire generations later. Inside however, life continues with remarkable steadiness. Bakers rise before dawn to prepare barley bread, while teachers instruct children in cuneiform writing inside temple schools. Scribes memorize long lists of symbols, while laborers haul supplies through crowded courtyards beside towering storehouses. Stability here feels carefully constructed, maintained daily through thousands of small efforts invisible to royal inscriptions. Archaeologists later uncover royal tombs, administrative archives, and delicate artifacts from Ur-3 beneath collapsed brick and layers of earth. These discoveries reveal not only rulers and officials, but traces of ordinary life preserved through time. Sometimes a simple receipt for grain or wool deliveries reveals more about humanity than monuments ever possibly could. As darkness settles fully across the city, oil lamps flicker softly beneath the towering silhouette of the ziggurat. Moonlight reflects gently across the canals, while distant voices fade behind mud brick walls. Far beyond the western deserts, the Amorites continue moving slowly toward Mesopotamia, carried forward by seasons and migrations no ruler can completely command or prevent. Before midnight settles over Ur, the city rests beneath stars older than every dynasty below. The walls, canals, temples, and records of Ur-3 still stand strong beneath the desert night. Yet beyond the calm rhythm of this restored kingdom, history continues moving patiently forward like the rivers themselves, never fully stopping or remaining unchanged for long. Babylon rises gradually beside the Euphrates, its walls catching the soft gold of late afternoon, while river water moves quietly through the ancient plain. The city does not appear suddenly like a vision from legend. Instead, it grows slowly through trade, administration, and careful political alliances until its name begins spreading across Mesopotamia with increasing weight and familiarity. You approach the city along a dusty road lined with irrigation canals, where farmers continue tending barley fields beneath the fading sunlight. Water flows steadily between narrow embankments, while reeds bend gently beside the current. The landscape feels deeply familiar, despite changing rulers and shifting borders. Human civilization here continues leaning upon the same rivers, the same soil, and the same patient cycles of cultivation. During the reign of Hammurabi, around 1754 before Christ, Babylon expands into one of the dominant powers of Mesopotamia. Historians remember him most clearly for the famous law code carved onto a tall basalt stele. Yet within the quiet rhythm of everyday life, his influence also spreads through taxes, trade routes, diplomacy, irrigation management, and endless administrative records copied carefully by generations of scribes. Inside Babylon's palace corridors, torchlight flickers softly across mud brick walls, while scribes sit beside low wooden tables, shaping cuneiform symbols into damp clay. Their careful work demands patience, discipline, and remarkable focus. Nearby, one exhausted apprentice quietly suspects that herding sheep across open fields might involve considerably fewer complicated symbols than palace administration. The Code of Hammurabi includes laws concerning trade, labor, property, family disputes, and agriculture. Though modern readers often focus upon its harsher punishments, the document also reveals how carefully organized Babylonian society had become. Rules attempt to create order within a world shaped constantly by floods, droughts, merchants, inheritance questions, and the endless unpredictability of ordinary human behavior. Outside the city walls, however, life changes far more slowly than royal decrees. Farmers still guide oxen through fields softened by canal water, while fishermen drift quietly along the Euphrates, searching for movement beneath the reflective surface. Women grind grain beside shaded courtyards, and potters shape wet clay into storage jars, exactly as earlier generations once did beneath older kingdoms now long vanished into dust. You walk through a marketplace where merchants display wool garments, bronze tools, sesame oil, and baskets filled with dates gathered from nearby groves. Voices rise and fall gently beneath woven shade coverings, while donkeys wait patiently beside overloaded carts. The atmosphere feels calm despite the political transformations shaping the wider region. Daily survival often leaves little energy for dramatic interest in royal succession disputes. Babylon's strength grows not only through military campaigns, but through strategic alliances and control over important waterways linking northern and southern Mesopotamia. Hammurabi gradually extends influence across neighboring territories, absorbing cities once independent under earlier dynasties. Yet the expansion unfolds over years, rather than moments, shaped through negotiation, pressure, warfare, and diplomacy woven together like threads inside a complex textile. At sunset, the Euphrates reflects deep red light beside the city walls, while narrow boats drift slowly through the current carrying grain and timber toward distant districts. The river moves with calm indifference beneath bridges, and beside temples dedicated to ancient gods older than Babylon itself. Water remembers nothing about political borders. It simply continues flowing through every generation without pause. The palace archives grow increasingly crowded with clay tablets recording taxes, trade agreements, legal judgments, and agricultural reports. Scribes organize shelves carefully inside storage rooms cooled by thick mud brick walls. Historians later discover thousands of such documents buried beneath collapsed structures. Even after empires disappear, paperwork somehow survives with astonishing determination beneath the earth. You pause beside one of the city canals as evening birds settle quietly among the reeds. Lamps begin appearing inside nearby homes while cooks prepare simple meals over small fires sheltered from the wind. The smell of baked barley bread drifts softly through the cooling air. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks at absolutely nothing, with the unwavering confidence only dogs seem capable of maintaining throughout history. Beyond Babylon, Mesopotamia continues shifting through cycles of alliance and conflict. Cities rise into prominence, weaken, and then yield space to new centers of power shaped by geography, trade, climate, and ambition. Yet beneath these larger movements, the ordinary patterns of life remain remarkably durable. Children still learn writing from teachers, laborers still repair canals, and families still gather quietly beneath evening skies. The law code itself stands as both political statement and philosophical attempt to impose stability upon an uncertain world. Carved into dark basalt, the inscriptions project permanence and authority. Yet time eventually wears away even stone. Wind softens sharp edges, kingdoms fade, and languages change, until future generations must carefully decipher the meanings left behind by rulers who once believed their systems eternal. In the neighborhoods beyond the palace district, artisans continue working long after sunset beneath oil lamps hanging from wooden beams. Jewelers polish beads from imported stones, while carpenters smooth cedar planks carried from distant mountains through extensive trade networks. Babylon thrives through connection as much as conquest, drawing resources and ideas inward from many surrounding lands. The city itself feels layered with histories resting quietly beneath each new construction. Older foundations remain buried below newer walls, while forgotten canals vanish beneath expanded roads and courtyards. Mesopotamia constantly builds upon its own past, each civilization leaving traces beneath the next, like overlapping footprints preserved carefully within river mud after seasonal floods slowly retreat. As darkness settles across Babylon, palace torches burn lower while guards patrol quietly along the outer walls. Beyond the city, irrigation canals shimmer faintly beneath moonlight, stretching across the plains toward distant settlements. The struggles between kings and dynasties begin feeling strangely small beside the endless continuity of water, soil, labor, and stars overhead each night. Before dawn returns, Babylon rests beside the Euphrates beneath a cool and silent sky. Hammurabi's laws remain pressed into clay and stone while canals continue feeding the barley fields surrounding the city. Somewhere within Mesopotamia's vast stillness, time moves gently onward, carrying every throne slowly toward memory beneath fading desert light and endless stars above. The centuries pass quietly across Mesopotamia as powerful cities slowly disappear beneath drifting sand and river silt. The Euphrates shifts course little by little, like an old traveler choosing another road after many seasons. Walls that once carried bronze gates now rest beneath pale dunes where dry grass bends gently beneath the cooling evening wind. You wander through fading streets where merchants once traded barley and wool beneath warm morning sunlight. Only scattered bricks remain beneath the dust, warming softly during the day before cooling again at night. Even the silence feels ancient here, gathering patiently across centuries. Overhead, a lonely bird circles calmly like a clerk searching endlessly for misplaced records. In many regions, abandoned canals slowly become shallow scars across the dry earth. Reeds grow where boats once carried copper, dates, and clay tablets between crowded cities. The sounds of labor fade gradually into memory, while desert wind moves softly across cracked soil. Nature patiently smooths the sharp edges of history beneath layers of drifting sand. By the first millennium BCE, newer kingdoms rise while older centers fade quietly into shadow. Assyria expands from the north with organized armies and grand palaces, Yet even these rulers build upon older worlds beneath their feet. Every empire inherits roads, canals, and stories from civilizations already dissolving slowly into silence beside the rivers. At Nineveh, royal scribes carefully preserved thousands of clay tablets inside the great library of King Ashurbanipal during the 7th century before Christ. Many texts describe battles and rulers, yet others quietly record recipes, prayers, farming accounts, and observations of the stars. The ordinary details feel strangely comforting beside the larger stories of conquest. Even ancient people apparently worried about missing supplies and delayed deliveries, which sounds remarkably familiar after any modern grocery trip. As evening settles across the plains, lamps flicker softly inside homes built from mud, brick, and reeds. Families share lentil stew and flatbread, while musicians play gentle melodies upon wooden lyres beneath open courtyards. Empires rise and disappear beyond distant walls, yet ordinary routines continue steadily, holding civilization together through uncertain centuries beside the rivers. 19th century archaeologists later uncover these buried worlds beneath the Mesopotamian sun with brushes, patience, and quiet excitement. Austin Henry Layard and others reveal forgotten statues and inscriptions hidden beneath earth for thousands of years. Dust rises slowly whenever another stone doorway emerges. One exhausted worker probably dreams constantly about cold lemonade beneath the relentless desert heat. Thousands of cuneiform tablets emerge from collapsed rooms where scribes once worked beside baskets of damp clay. Some records describe eclipses and floods with remarkable precision, while others preserve hymns, poetry, and family letters. These surviving words feel deeply human across time. One father complains about expenses while another apologizes endlessly for delayed shipments and missing goods. In Uruk, broken temple walls rest beneath open skies where stars return nightly without concern for vanished kingdoms. Wild plants grow between fallen bricks once polished smooth by countless footsteps. Lizards bask quietly where priests carried offerings beneath painted banners. With every century, the city grows quieter, and the silence itself begins telling stories about endurance and change. You wander slowly through these forgotten spaces in the soft blue light before dawn. The air smells faintly of dust and distant water carried by the wind from surviving river channels. Somewhere beyond the ruins, farmers still guide animals through fields much as their ancestors once did long ago. Human life continues gently onward, even while the names of rulers fade into uncertainty. The great statues buried beneath the earth often survive only in fragments. Faces are worn smooth, wings broken, and inscriptions partially erased by moisture and time. Yet even damaged figures still carry an atmosphere of quiet dignity. They seem less like symbols of lost power and more like tired guardians, finally allowed to rest after centuries of standing beneath open skies and desert storms. Modern climate studies suggest that shifting river systems played a large role in the abandonment of many Mesopotamian cities. As waterways moved away from urban centers, agriculture became harder to maintain, and trade routes slowly weakened. The process unfolded gradually across generations, rather than through sudden collapse alone. Nature rarely hurries itself, and history often changes at the same patient speed as eroding stone. At night, the desert cools beneath enormous fields of stars stretching across the Mesopotamian sky. Travelers resting beside ruined walls hear only wind moving through dry reeds near forgotten canals. The silence feels strangely protective, wrapping gently around the old cities like a blanket laid carefully across sleeping shoulders beneath pale silver moonlight and drifting desert air. The people who once lived here likely never imagined their homes would become archaeological sites studied thousands of years later. They worried more about floods, taxes, harvests, and family disagreements than distant immortality. Yet their handwriting survives upon clay tablets long after palaces crumble into dust. History often preserves small details through unexpectedly gentle and ordinary moments. As centuries pass, Mesopotamia slowly transforms from a landscape of crowded city-states into a quieter region layered with memory beneath the soil. Sand covers roads where armies marched beneath bronze standards. Reeds sway above buried courtyards where children once laughed during cool evenings beside canal water. The earth absorbs every sound eventually, softening even the echoes of ambition into stillness. You begin sensing that the true story of Mesopotamia is not only about kings or wars, but about continuity itself. Rivers continue flowing long after royal names disappear from memory. Stars continue crossing the heavens above abandoned temples and silent gates. Human lives remain brief beside the enormous patience of the natural world, yet each generation still leaves small traces behind like footprints beside wet clay. Tonight the ancient cities rest quietly beneath drifting sand and distant constellations. The wind moves gently across broken walls where lanterns once glowed beside crowded marketplaces and temple stairways. Somewhere in the darkness, water still flows through the old lands between the Tigris and Euphrates. And in that deep and patient silence, Mesopotamia slowly falls asleep once more beneath the endless desert sky. The final night settles softly across Mesopotamia as the old kingdoms disappear slowly into darkness beside the Tigris and Euphrates. Battles once filled with urgency now survive only as thin layers beneath earth and stone. Time moves gently across everything remaining, while the rivers continue flowing patiently beneath silent stars above the sleeping plains each night. You stand beside the ancient water, listening to the gentle current moving through reeds along the quiet riverbank beneath the cool night air. Beneath the soil rest broken walls, forgotten roads, and buried courtyards where countless lives once unfolded beneath harsh desert suns. Yet the land feels peaceful now, as though history itself has finally exhaled after carrying restless memories across many silent centuries. Geologists explain these river plains formed through millions of years of flooding and sediment carried from distant northern mountains. Long before kings raised bronze weapons or ordered temple walls constructed, the rivers already wandered across these lowlands with calm determination. Human empires arrived very late within Earth's vast timeline, like brief campfires glowing beside endless darkness. The kingdoms of Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, and Babylon once believed themselves permanent beneath the heavens. Their rulers carved names into stone and raised towering monuments toward the sky. Yet even the strongest walls eventually softened beneath wind, water, and shifting sand. Nature waits quietly through every generation, never rushing, never pausing, simply continuing its long and silent work. At night, the stars above Mesopotamia appear much the same as they did thousands of years ago when priests watched them from temple rooftops. Orion still rises over the plains. The moon still reflects silver light onto slow-moving canals and dark river water. The sky carries a strange comfort because it remembers every civilization without belonging to any of them completely. You can almost imagine an old Sumerian farmer resting beside the Euphrates after tending barley fields beneath the afternoon heat. Perhaps he listens to frogs along the riverbank while smoke rises gently from nearby homes built of mud brick and reeds. His worries feel ordinary and deeply human despite the enormous distance between his world and yours. History becomes softer when viewed through small moments like these. Archaeologists continue uncovering fragments of Mesopotamia even today. New tablets emerge from forgotten rooms, preserving songs, tax records, prayers, and letters hidden beneath collapsed walls for thousands of years. Many discoveries are surprisingly simple rather than grand. Someone complains about missing grain deliveries. Another writer asks politely for more beer supplies, proving once again that civilization truly rests on very relatable priorities. The rivers remember all of it without judgment. They remember the armies crossing shallow water beneath bronze helmets. They remember children learning to shape cuneiform symbols into wet clay beneath dim temple light. They remember merchants guiding boats through reeds during quiet dawns when mist still floated above the canals like pale fabric drifting through the air. Over long stretches of time, entire cities vanish beneath layers of sediment carried by seasonal floods. The outlines of palaces dissolve into the earth, while birds nest among abandoned bricks. Dry grass grows over streets where officials once announced royal decrees with solemn voices. The transformation feels gentle rather than tragic, as though the land carefully folds each civilization back into itself. Even the grandest throne eventually becomes another artifact resting inside a museum case beneath soft electric lights. Visitors walk slowly past ancient crowns, carved seals, and fragments of statues while reading small labels beside the glass. Some people linger thoughtfully. Others hurry toward the gift shop with the determined speed of travelers searching for coffee before closing time. The deeper you travel into the story of Mesopotamia, the quieter it becomes. At first, there are kings, wars, and ambitious cities rising beside fertile canals. Later, there are ruins, drifting sand, and distant memories preserved through archaeology. Finally, there is only water moving patiently beneath moonlight while reeds sway softly along the shore in the cool night air. You begin leaving behind the crowded marketplaces of Uruk and the towering ziggurats of Ur. The long roads of Akkad fade gently into darkness. Babylon's torchlit halls disappear like reflections trembling briefly on river water before dissolving into stillness. One by one, the old empires release their hold on the imagination and settle back into silence. In geological time, even centuries of warfare resemble little more than brief flickers across an ancient landscape. Floods return, riverbanks shift, marshes expand and disappear again. The earth continues changing through rhythms too vast for any empire to command. Human history, for all its intensity, occupies only a small and temporary corner within the deeper story of the planet itself. A soft wind moves through the reeds beside the water, producing a faint rustling sound, almost like whispered conversation. Perhaps this is the closest thing the ancient world leaves behind after all its struggles and triumphs. Not monuments or battles, but atmosphere, a feeling of continuity carried quietly through landscapes that outlast every generation passing across them. You sit beside the dark river one final time and listen to the calm movement of water beneath the stars. The night air feels cooler now. Somewhere far away, a bird calls once before falling silent again. The old kingdoms no longer seem distant or mysterious. They feel human, temporary, and strangely familiar beneath the endless sky stretching above the Mesopotamian plains. The wind grows softer as the hours pass, and the boundaries between past and present slowly begin fading away. There is no need to hold tightly to the names of kings or the outcomes of ancient wars anymore. The rivers continue carrying their quiet memory forward through the darkness, asking nothing from the world except time itself. And now only the faint sound of water remains beside the reeds and distant sand. The ancient walls rest beneath the earth. The old roads sleep beneath drifting dust. History dissolves gently into silence, slow and deep like a dream with no clear ending, while the rivers of Mesopotamia continue flowing calmly beneath the night forever. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.